So, καλησπέρα συνάνθρωποι μου, ελπίζω πρώτα απ' όλα να είσαστε όλοι σας υγιείς, υγιεροί και δυνατοί. Επιστρέψαμε για το live broadcast του Original Minds νούμερο 56 και μαζί μας σήμερα έχουμε έναν άνθρωπο ο οποίος διαμορφώνει τους ηγέτες του αύριο σε παγκόσμιο επίπεδο. Όλο αυτό το broadcast θα είναι στην αγγλική γλώσσα, για τον λόγο ότι ο άνθρωπος είναι κοντά μας από την Ελβετία, από τη Γενέβη συγκεκριμένα, και θα μιλήσουμε για τους ηγέτες του σήμερα. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being with us. This is Original Minds broadcast number 56. Bear with me with my language flaws, let's say, because I'm moving from language to language very often, and I try to be as clear as possible. I will also try to be as clear in my pronunciation as possible in order to make myself understandable. So broadcast number 56, as you see in the title, Leadership in the 21st Century is the subject we have with us, but I would rather say we have the honor to have with us today a man that has been shaping the leaders of tomorrow for numerous years now. I want to read a few things here for Francisco Baptista. He gave us his time. He's straight out of Switzerland with us. So let me just make a brief introduction of who Francisco is and what he has been working on the past few years, or let's say his most of his life. So a managing partner of Systems Leadership, a training academy for change agents. Francisco is an executive coach and large group facilitator that focuses on creating meaningful dialogues and experiences where various stakeholders tap into distributed intelligence to generate solutions to complex problems. Francisco has over 20 years experience in change management and operational excellence in scaling processes, as well as spearheading organizational transformation around the world across a wide range of industries. Having worked and lived in culturally diverse countries such as South Africa, Germany, Brazil, United States, and now in the home base of Switzerland, Francisco is at ease across cultures, who is at the same time in tune with local ways of working traditions and unwritten rules. He has worked closely with leaders across a wide range of industries. Francisco is a dual Swiss and Portuguese national. His travels have made him fluent in German, Portuguese, French, and English. His qualifications are as following: Masters in Physics, the Educators Challenge Award he won last year to mitigate global risks, Global Challenge Foundation in 2019, faculty of the European Center for Leadership. He's past member of the Board of Directors of International Coaching Federation and the Swiss chapter, professional certified coach, certified sign-off practitioner, Cognitive Edge, organization and relationship systems coach, Center for Right Relationships, certified professional coactive coach, certified associate lectica coach, a certified in the use of leadership circle, TAC, and certified deep democracy dialogue facilitator, the No Name Institute. As you see, for today, we will have fellow human with us that has an abundance of knowledge in the sphere of leadership. So I hope that everybody will join us for this broadcast. Don't forget to support Original Minds on the 4 different platforms that we are using. Facebook is our primary platform, Instagram that is still growing, TikTok, and YouTube. All the platforms. You can support our future projects on Patreon, and you can also visit our website, originalminds.co, originalminds.co. See about all the services and the goals that the services that we provide and all the goals that we have for the future. So a very easy way to help us spread the word and spread the knowledge of our today's live broadcast is by just starting a watch party with your friends so everybody can watch it. So let me just get into my watch party here, share it, and with no further ado, I will bring up the guest of honor of today that we have with us, Mr. Francisco Baptista. There we have, no, No, let me see. Let me see. Let me see. Let me go back a little bit here. Sorry about this. Start a watch party. Now I've just started my watch party. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I'm ready to go, and let me get Francisco with us. Must be on any second now. There we go. There we go. Good afternoon, good evening. It's 7:06 in Cyprus, 6:06 in Switzerland. How are you, Francisco?
Good evening. I'm feeling fine. This is great. It's a beautiful summer evening, and can't wait to get out and get out there into the pool.
Is it you got really long days also now during this time of the year, yeah? Right? What time does it get dark in Switzerland? About 10 o'clock at night or something like
I
that?
have no idea. Probably 10. Yeah.
Probably 10.
But here in
Francisco,
Switzerland, we
how was
don't.
my introduction? If I missed a few words, I'm sorry about that, but I hope I did you some justice in the
Thank you.
introduction.
I'm very honored.
Excellent. Thank you very much for giving us your time, Francisco. So, as you said, nice weather in Switzerland. How's the weather anyway? I mean, you got some sunny days. We had our chats in the last couple of days. You're visiting the mountains, getting inspiration for your next moves. How is it? How are you feeling getting out of this quarantine situation? I don't know how it was in Switzerland. Was it really on a lockdown or not that much up in Switzerland?
We had a lockdown, which was a civilized lockdown in terms of it wasn't supposed to be, there were no laws where you were really locked into the house.
Okay.
It was more of a civil respect towards everybody else. And so
Okay.
it was largely respected,
There was
not all the time, but it worked.
but taking care of each other, let's say that was the mindset. That's what you're saying, I believe.
A big chunk, yeah.
Excellent, nice to hear that. So you got nice sunny weather, summer weather in Switzerland also now. And what a world is it that we are living in, Francisco. Thank you again very much for having the time to be with us. And let me just get this thing rolling. We need leadership. We need the leaders of tomorrow. We need the leaders of the 21st century. We've talked about it a little bit before and in our previous chats. And it's really challenging. If it was hard for a leader back in the days in the 50s or the 1800s, just imagine today. It's just it's scary to think about all the responsibilities and all the tasks you have to take upon in this modern world and this modern society. uh, how do you see it, Francisco? Do you believe it's really harder today for leadership to be upfront and actually lead by example? Does it require a bigger, let's say, skills, harder skills to be the leaders of the 21st century, Francisco?
Look, I think what has changed is the context.
Mhm.
So up until say 2010, something like that, we weren't in a hyper-connected world.
Mhm.
And so a lot of the leadership in that context, in that world, could be done top down. There were
Yes,
many books, many leadership theories about the hero leader who, is out there, knows everything, and all he needs to do or she needs to do is tell people what to do.
exactly.
And today the context is different. We are so connected with each other through many ways. And so there is no more this effectiveness on top-down leadership.
Mhm.
It becomes more of a different type of leadership is required to get things done, to get people aligned behind you, to create movements, and to create the changes that we all want.
What is it? What is that component that you believe is very essential? Not one, as obviously there's many components, but in order to have the support of the people and people follow you as a leader in these day and age where everything is so uncertain, information is so contradicting, left and right. What is that one thing that you believe that a leader needs in order to build that trust and the people that listen to him in order for them to actually stand behind him? How do you think that is achieved in the modern society of today?
Well, it's difficult because we are not really asking ourselves, why are we standing up every morning? And in which ways are we in integrity with ourselves? Why are we doing the things we're doing? And so we wake up, we go to work, we never really ask these questions. And I think in this modern society, that is not necessarily the questions we are asked to ask ourselves.
Mm.
And so we just keep on doing things without really knowing what's the purpose and how does this fit into the bigger picture. And I think a leader, if you, to answer your question, I think a leader needs to be in integrity with their own purpose and
Mm.
whatever they want to stand up for every morning and do that every single day. And
This
then look back in the evening and say, yes, I did that.
true, true. This is, in other words, let me just add something as what you said now, being as the component that you mentioned, or let's say you must be familiar with this term. A leader has to find his ikigai first. Let's say you know what the ikigai is.
Yes.
So a leader must find his ikigai first, so his purpose of being at the end of the day, in order to be moving in a more certain manner, let's say, a more clear manner, so that people get inspired for that, to see a clear picture. That is what you're saying in different words, let's say.
Yes, absolutely. You need to know why and what works for you. And that might not work for others, but it will work for you. And so, despite any challenges that are out there, you will stand up and you will go that way.
Mhm.
Yeah.
To be clear with your goals and with what you're aiming at and what there's. And another thing, another component that we have talked about a little bit earlier, Francisco, together before we get on the live broadcast, is you mentioned um, um, no ego is to actually really serve a higher cause or a greater cause. A leader has to put himself behind his ego behind and forget about it totally and literally serve a higher or greater cause, right?
Well, let me challenge that idea. You
Okay.
do need an ego. You do need to have an opinion, right?
Yes.
You have to, otherwise people will roll over you and there is no leadership. So a bit of that is necessary.
Hmm.
But here's the thing, and you'd said a bigger purpose, and the purpose doesn't need to be world big. It can be, you know, a need for a team, a need for a family, a need for a community, a need for your city. Whatever the need is that that group is there for, that's what you're serving. That is what you are there to help and lead. And many leaders today don't know how to ask for help.
But it's not a personal lead, it's more a holistic lead, like a society that's in a bigger number. It's not on a personal need level. That's what you're
No,
saying.
it's a bit bigger than you. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely. And for that to work out, you need good relationships. You need to build them. You need to nurture other people. You need to grow other people so that you have the capacity and the agility to do so.
You just mentioned that you have to have some sort of not some dash of ego in order not for people to roll over you, as you mentioned. So, on that, I believe that personally, my personal opinion, I don't believe that everyone can be a leader. You have to have that certain set of character and a certain ego, as you mentioned it in your words before. Do you really believe that everybody, every human being can be a leader? Because I don't know, it's kind of, if I look at society and the way it's built, not saying that it's perfect, but certain people get in certain places and certain people don't. Do you believe that there is a magic, or not a magic, there is a formula or a way of making everyone a leader, or maybe a leader in their own way?
Well, here's a few thoughts around that. I think not everybody needs to be a leader.
Mhm.
Everybody can be a leader as long as they want it. And yes, this can be learned, but you need to be ready to engage with a tough process of going out there, getting feedback, changing behaviors, changing the way you think, and being humble so that you grow as a person. And the biggest leaders I, follow are humble people.
Mhm, mhm, mhm. So, it's the approach would be mostly that everybody's capable of change. So if you're a submissive person, you are able to become a person that changes himself into a more um, leadership figure. Let's say you are able to change. Yes,
Yes.
yeah, that makes sense. Makes sense to maybe rephrase my opinion on that on a deeper conversation, on a deeper level.
Now,
So,
here's the fallacy.
come again?
Here's the fallacy of this thought, though, because we are always saying, "Oh, we want to change an organization, we want to change the world," and
Mm,
so the fallacy is to think that to do that, you need to scale leadership. Everybody needs to be trained.
mm,
That's going to take a lot of resources and a lot of time.
mm.
Um, I don't think we have much time.
That's another argument that a lot of people are doing actually in your line of work in the scientific world, and on and there's many leaders also that are calling out to it today. And let's well, talking about the leaders today. I was really shocked. I would like to have your opinion on one thing that I saw today. I haven't the chance to ask you previously, but now as we mentioned leaders, um, well, we had this lockdown. 3 billion people were confined in their homes. In our country, in Cyprus, we were allowed to be out of our houses from 9 o'clock in the morning to 6 o'clock in the morning to 9 o'clock at night. And 9 o'clock to 6 o'clock in the morning, it was total curfew. If you were on the streets, you would get arrested.
Mhm.
We got out of the lockdown out of the first countries. We've managed the whole thing very good. But from a total lockdown, we went out now, and the whole world, if you looked at the US, and then we have from total lockdown, total chaos, which broke through after that racist fact of another person, black person being killed from a racist police, which in fact has been within the American culture always. Segregation, racism. It happened. You remember the 90s when Los Angeles got burned down almost completely from another racist incident with the policeman against a black person, and the world broke out into chaos. We've got Black Lives Matter movements, and what I saw today, this is my question. Today, I saw some leaders, the ex-president of the United States, saluting the Black Lives Matter movement. Where at the end of the day, what I see and what I understand, it's chaos breaking loose, police being attacked, and chaos being saluted by an ex-president, and who says that we all stand with Black Lives Matter. So a movement that at the end of the day, yes, you have a central message of it's unjust. Yes, racism does exist. It's unjust. It's unlawful. A person got killed, but breaking into chaos, destroying more lives, more businesses, more economies. That's not way to protest in my eyes. And so looking at leaders actually saluting these movements, it was kind of very dazzling. How do you see this?
Well, I'm not going to comment on whether something was politically correct or, the right decision. Um, what I can say is that when there is chaos, you need to act. You need to do something. Otherwise, it's just going to get worse.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Now, what do you need to do is a very good question because you won't know until you have done it
True,
in
true.
chaos. That is what the nature of this context is.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Otherwise, if you go into analysis, you go into paralysis, and then nothing happens, and then it gets even worse.
Exactly, and the type of
So,
analysis plays a big role also. And it's like we need education, as you said. We
mm,
need people to get educated. But the rhetoric or the way we trying to educate people, the way we are trying to get through to people today, to see the picture and take their own decisions and their right decisions. Say, um, what do you believe is the right approach in adult education today? How can we get the vast majority of people to get the picture? Which ways, in what mechanisms can we deploy?
mm.
In what are the ways, Francisco, in your eyes, to get through to the masses through education today?
Well, that's exactly what we're doing. So in my corporate life, I've done so much training, both as a trainer and as a participant.
Mm-hmm.
And what I've noticed is it's always here's a model, here's a PowerPoint presentation, uh, and that's it. To be fair,
I'm already, as soon as the PowerPoint goes on, I'm already lost.
yeah. And usually you go back after the training and you're trying to figure out how do I apply this into my real world,
Mm-hmm.
and how do I, now that I've a bit of excitement, hopefully, how do I get others to play along? Because it's you might have changed, but the others haven't changed, and so they won't understand your new language, your new models, your new way of wanting to do things. So what happens is you go
Mm-hmm.
back and the whole training is sort of lost. Um, so what we do is something completely different. And it goes back to this original idea around leadership is leaders create the containers for learning to happen in others. Yeah. So what we do is we create these learning environments, these places where people can go in. They can bring their challenges. They can bring their heart. They can bring themselves. They can bring their incompleteness. Yeah, and be safe and be okay with failing, with
Yes.
trying things out, with you know talking to others and learning from others, learning from us, but also learning from others, and doing that type of experiential learning
Mm-hmm.
accelerates and transforms people.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so what I do every single day, why I stand up every day, is to really scale that in such a way that it's not any longer, because I'm my background as a coach was a one-on-one conversation and one-on-one transformation of people, but that's not scalable. And so one of the two pillars that we're doing is really scaling this up on a digital platform. And thanks in a way to the pandemic that taught us this is an opportunity to step up the game, to really not go into this victimizing role of there is no more business, but rather to take it as an opportunity to say, okay, things have changed, we accept it, and what is possible in this new reality? And the answer to us was this digital way of being. And
Mm-hmm.
so that enables us to scale our training and our ways of running experiential training. And so I think this is one model. I'm not saying that this is the only model, but this is one of the only models I know
Yeah.
that can really, reach out to adults, because your question was about adult development. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Well, we need
Um,
to make a change. It's not only about the young generation. It's about
exactly.
the older generation also. There are ways to educate them. I'm not a believer that, as you mentioned before, people and everyone is capable of change. In that aspect, yes, way of thinking and every day, we are creatures of habits. There are habits we can change. Habits.
Hmm.
It might be those 10 difficult days, 10, 20 difficult days, but then we are able to make great changes as humans because we are as a species. We are built to improvise, adapt, and overcome. So it's a very interesting part of this change.
And I just want to add to that, because it is we are creatures of habit. So a course by itself isn't enough.
mm,
Yeah.
mm,
It,
mm,
you need to have a sort of a family, a cohort, a tribe, or whatever it is, a group of like-minded people that like each other, that
mm,
have the same sort of purpose and goals,
mm,
and can get together to help each other not go back.
mm,
Yeah, to sustain that learning, to sustain that accountability, to develop further. And
mm.
that is a second very important component in adult development that we don't see very often.
Yeah, true, true. You also mentioned about that victimizing mindset, about being negative about the whole thing, and oh, we failed in business and this and that. And but you added up on that, saying that no, there's where there's a failure in the system or a person who failed, there's something to learn out of it, and there's new opportunities born of these situations. This is what I believe that you meant. So, how would you advise a businessman, a leader of in any aspect of society today, how to cope with that negative feeling and actually turn it into a positive to see those windows of opportunity and strive towards those? What would you say to people? Yeah.
I love the question because it's always how do I get others to be courageous enough to share? And
Mm-hmm.
actually, the place you need to start is with yourself and say, well, am I courageous enough to allow myself to fail? And
Mm-hmm.
that's the very first thing. Because if you can do that, if you can say, well, it was a failure, and here, and by the way, this is what we learned, and this is great learning.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Not only can you share that, but what you're doing, which is more important, I believe, is that you are modeling that. You are giving permission to others to do that. And by doing that, you get the change that you want, not only in failure, but in everything. So it's always going back to yourself and always looking in there and saying, hey, am I
Mm-hmm.
doing what I'm asking the others to do?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And on a even deeper level, it's one word. It's fear. It's how we are being controlled of fear of failure. I remember, and this quote always comes back to me when I talk about the sense of failure, how people approach it. We always say at Original Minds that failure is a good thing. It's a learning stage. It's nothing bad. It's a learning stage. I always come back to the quote when Michael Jordan was asked by a journalist, "How did you become Michael Jordan?" was the question.
Yeah.
And he replied by saying, I missed 4,000 shots.
Yes.
So that made Michael Jordan. So at the end of the day, if you look at the greatest, if we even look at the greatest figures in history, there were like Einstein was not taken in by numerous universities. People, it's like if you look at all these people that have done a great change in the world and have put down their little stone in history, they have numerous of stories of failure. They failed so many times in order to get where they got. And that's, I think, another component. The fear, Francisco. We are living in a world of fear. Fear is everywhere. Even now, after the pandemic, it's even more induced. As you mentioned before, we don't have much time. We are winding up to unprecedented speeds in society, speed and everyday task, and also this fear is piling up. We see people are acting more out of emotions and not using their sense that much because they're being bombarded with all this fear of failing, of danger, of disease, of not having money, and all these kind. Uh, it's really dazzling and really really worrying to see of how can we combat this fear. But if because why am I emphasizing on fear now, Francisco? Because literally, if we take this component out of the equation, fear, imagine how different everything would be. And trying, innovating, whatever it is, that one component. is it within the human nature? Do you believe that fear is something that people can be trained to manage better? Is that a component that should train first in order to be more receptive as a person to change, maybe? How do you see this? How do you see fear, Francisco?
Well, I think we have fear for a good reason.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
the fear allows us to not spend very much energy in making decisions.
Mm-hmm.
So in a dangerous situation, fear will take over and you will run or avoid the situation. Absolutely okay. Nothing wrong with that.
Burst of energy, though. Fear would be a burst of energy. If you look at fear and if you get afraid and you're adrenaline, your blood goes to your hands
Exactly.
and arms. So, and you get a burst of energy. So you're using a lot of energy because your blood is pumping and everything. So you're using a lot of energy when you're afraid. You're
Yes.
actually not relaxed. So,
So, and it allows you to react appropriately in legitimate situations where that is necessary. Now,
well, if you're afraid to take a test, how would fear help you take a test?
it probably will block you.
Exactly. That
That's
wouldn't help
exactly.
you. It
Yeah,
would fear would be good in a fight or flight situation. Fight or
exactly.
flight situation would fear would be okay. But what other situation would fear be
And
be
fear,
working?
fear keeps us on our feet.
Mhm,
Fear allows us to be vigilant and look at weak signals that are coming our way. Now, the way we interpret these weak signals, the way we interpret the reality, the way we look at things, sometimes we associate with that fearful emotions.
mhm,
And then it goes into the illegitimate, not the legitimate way, the illegitimate way
mhm,
of reacting to circumstances rather than seeing what they are
mhm,
and creating from them,
mhm,
creating from the circumstances.
mhm,
And that, that can be trained, that can be learned. And it has a lot to do with neuroscience and how our two brains, our system one and system two, operate. Our
mhm.
older brain, which drives our fear and our behaviors, and this prefrontal cortex in the front of our heads, which is more
Reptilian
the,
brain and yes.
yeah, which is much slower, uh, uses much more energy to think,
Mhm,
but it can that can be trained, and that allows us to then take those tests despite the
mhm.
fear. That allows us to walk up to the podium and speak to a crowd and tell them what is necessary.
Exactly, and that's what it's like. It's can we call it control of emotions? Like whatever is being thrown to us, like Stoicism. You are familiar with Stoicism,
Mm.
yes?
Yeah, this thing with emotions is they're information. There's nothing bad or wrong with them. I think what you need to know is, oh, it's an emotion. I'm not
Mhm.
encompassed. I'm not in that emotion
Not
so much that
defined.
it takes over myself. It's more like, yeah, oh, yeah, and you learn this, for example, in meditation a lot, where you start to train yourself in noticing these things and saying, oh, okay, here's this little idea or a little fear, and I let it go.
Mhm, mhm.
And it might inform me about something, but it's not going to take over myself. And it's a conscious decision
Yeah.
um, to do.
And that's what, as you said, it's not about emotions, it's not about negative or positive. Whatever is coming towards us or what we experience, it's up to us on how to interpret things, if it's negative or positive or how it makes us feel. So to be able to control um, these signals of information, as you mentioned them, it's I don't know. You heard the music. It's we still have the traditional Iceman, with the
Oh,
ice truck.
wonderful. Yeah.
And well, it's a nice thing of the culture in Cyprus. It's a very close society. So Stoicism is kind of based on this thing of controlling the information that come to you and making out of them exactly what you want. And you know that Stoicism, actually the founder of Stoicism, Zeno, uh, he comes from Cyprus and he comes from a city that I'm living actually here from ancient Kition. He left. He was a merchant that went to Athens
Mhm.
back in the day, and he started Stoicism. And he actually inspired Marcus Aurelius to write meditations. You are familiar with the meditations of Marcus Aurelius. And actually, those meditations were also read by Nelson Mandela when he was in prison all those years in order to make it through those hardships he went through. So it's a kind of a mindset. So there is a leadership mindset, would you say? Is there something like this? Does something like this exist in words or as a term for you, Francisco? Is there a mindset? Is leadership mindset? What is leadership for you, Francisco?
It's difficult to talk about mindset. My mentors have been battling with me because they're telling me there is no such thing as a mindset.
Mm-hmm.
And to a certain degree, I agree with them because everybody is different. And so you can't put a model of a mindset, whatever that means, in people. It's constantly changing in the way you interpret things. But to come back to your question around, is there an attitude, perhaps, is maybe the word, of a leader? And that one, yeah, it's if I had to boil it down to one thing, it would be presence. Presence with yourself, presence with the world, present with what is going on, and allowing yourself to be informed by that presence. And that will change your life if you can do that.
So the leadership, as you mentioned before, also one thing that I wanted to talk about is from top to down.
Mhm.
And what we're seeing is throughout history, because I've studied as much as I can history also, and I see this pattern of society going thriving and then getting to a point where there's like all these problems and chaos is breaking through. And obviously, at the end of the day, it's a whole collapse in order for a new thing to start up. And we are seeing this repeating itself in the leaders of the previous generations and all these kind of things. We kind of see the same. Me, for instance, I see the same pattern coming again. We thrive as civilization again in technology and whatever you want to call it, and we are coming to a tipping point again, with everything is like kind of falling apart again, and there's like numerous of people dying here and there and this and that. Does that always have to happen? What are these leaders doing wrong? Do we do we need a new set of leaders today to actually tackle the problems of today in a different way? Because as far as I've seen through history, like I mentioned before, we do strive and thrive up to a point when everything goes wrong and then everything comes
Mm.
collapsing down and everything starts again.
Yeah.
But does that have to happen every time? Does that collapse, that chaos have to happen every time for something new or something to change or change can happen? Do you see that we have the right set of leaders today in order to make that change as less less costful as possible for society? Or is there
Yeah.
still space to bring those leaders in the right position? How do you see this coming about on a global scale, Francisco?
Well, I see it in all levels and all fractal levels of society, from the team that has a leader that continues doing the old thing,
Mm-hmm.
to CEOs, not all, but many, that don't see the signs and continue doing their job, and then their company becomes irrelevant.
True.
And there's even the term Kodak moment.
Mm-hmm.
And then leaders in governments who are not seeing what is truly happening and sort of blocking it from their even own perception.
Mm-hmm.
I think we all can upgrade ourselves. We
Mm-hmm.
all can become more familiar and befriend complexity and systems, and start to see beyond our own plate. And I think that is a capacity that I'm very interested in developing, because I believe that that is the answer to the other question that we put up, which was, do we need to train everybody as a leader? And I think that's not necessary. It's good. And it needs to come together with something else, which is, how do you create and govern complex societies, complex organizations? Even a team is complex. And how do you govern it or enable it for it to thrive? And that requires a bit of a different thinking and attitude than this linear approach. Here is the checklist. Here are the rules. Here is what I am telling you to do. That's going to break down
What
in
is
a.
the right attitude? What is the right attitude in your eyes, Francisco?
It is really not thinking that you have all of the answers,
Mm.
but allowing others to share their perspective, to check in with them. You don't need to give away your capacity to decide. If you
Yes.
are the decision maker, you can stay with that. But you do need to make your homework and check in with the other stakeholders and see how they are perceiving the situation, and then make an informed decision. Now, this sounds like common sense.
Well,
Um, and yet we all know that that is exactly what is probably not happening.
yeah, true.
And that's the first step towards systems thinking, and seeing that whatever you do will always have an unintended consequence. And you need to be okay with that. And you need to be able to manage that unintended consequence, and also be humble enough to say it didn't work out. I need to revert. And how many policies and regulations do we have today that are basically ghosts? They could keep on living, keep on governing our ways of being, but they're not used necessary anymore. And so that, why is that still in the case? Because people are not humble enough to say, hey, I made a mistake. I need to take a step back. You know?
The rather the yeah, well, the nice mea culpa term that a lot of politicians like to use at the end of the day. Francisco, humbleness, um, more, let's say, how can I phrase it now? Sometimes I lose the words. Um, to be a part of the team, not to dictate everything. Yes, you're a decision maker. You have to care about the others, about their striving, their thriving, and all these kind of things. Name a few, if you can, please, examples of leaders that you admire for their own way of being. You mentioned one before when we had a chat. Can you mention some throughout the history that are worth mentioning as leaders that actually encompass what you are saying?
Well, we mentioned Greta Thunberg as a person that we admire in terms of, um, of standing up and being behind a cause. Whether
Mm,
it is the right way to do it or not is a different question.
mm,
But she's humble. She gets she says, I'm not gonna, she's walking the talk. And for that, she needs to be humble and cross the ocean with a boat where it's not comfortable. That's humility right there. You have Nelson
step
Mandela,
up to the meeting.
who we touched upon earlier. I think he is very humble.
Mm.
And there are other people that we all know, like the Dalai Lama, who is, a very, very humble person. And he just sits down, is present, and speaks wisdom just like that. A very advanced, complex systems thinker. That's what I see in him. And together with humility, can you imagine if we had more of those people?
Let's talk a little bit about the sense of humility,
Hmm.
Francisco. I would love to have a little chat on this. Let's talk about. Let me give you the floor. Where does that derive from? The sense of humility. I've read it in so many different ways, even animals and everything. Let's talk a little bit about humility. Why do you think it's so important for not only for a leader? I think for everyone, the sense of not only for a leader, for everyone, the sense of humility is really, really important in their own um, development and their own seeing themselves and seeing their flaws and their
Hmm.
turbulence and their mistakes and everything. How do you see humility? Why do you think it's so important, not only for leaders but for everyone else?
I think it clouds judgment if you are not humble and you think that you know it best, or that you are not ready to admit that you don't know.
Mm.
Uh, and if you're not in that place, if you think that everything is fine, you become blind. And then you cannot admit that there might be something that needs to be taken care of. And, earlier I said it always starts with you. So that's the most central place to start. If you are a leader and you cannot admit that, there might be something to take a deeper look in you, then you're very clouded. And unfortunately, that has impacts on yourself, on the people that you are working with, but even more importantly, to the children we have. How many times do I see intergenerational problems and traumas continue from generation to generation because of this? Yeah. And it just starts because a person might not be humble. Come on, get your act together.
It's not. It's like really not
Yeah.
living in reality, not seeing the real world. Not
Yeah.
having people is like not seeing the real world.
That's why I think it's so important to take a look there first sometimes.
Well, I like to put it on top there. There's this song I grew up with also. I believe many people also is as you mentioned, everything starts by ourselves. You remember the I Struck Man again, and the Man in the Mirror from Michael Jackson. You remember that song?
Hmm.
It talks exactly about that. Society today is in this day and age so passive. Somehow and for some reason, people are waiting for solutions to come out of somewhere or from someone, and which people don't act,
Hmm.
don't get into the um, attitude that you are mentioning. They don't move forward, and they're kind of on a passive level. And we need to activate society in a way in order for them to start being active citizens, and we instigate the change that we want, because it's not going to come from somewhere, as you said just now.
And that is the reason why we train change agents to be courageous, to go out there and hold up a mirror.
Mm.
That is the essence of what we need to do. Say,
So,
here is it, and is this what you want?
just clear it, is it clearing it out to man. So just now we are about 47 minutes in now, Francisco. So let's go up down to the last part, because we want to keep, we can't, exhaust any subject on a 45-minute thing, but we definitely definitely enjoyed it so far, and we definitely have it again. So now moving on to the last part of our nice conversation, our first nice conversation, I hope, Francisco, is so let's talk about a little bit about your work. Where can we where can people become leaders of tomorrow, of today? Where can we find you? How can we look into your, as I mentioned on the introduction before, you work in multiple things. Information in your own words, Francisco, how people can look you up and get all this value information and activate themselves, let's say.
Well, look, we have a training academy that is not just training. It is training, and it's a movement. It's a network where you can connect and can learn from each other, and you can do that in an experiential way online. So you don't need to travel. And in these days and age, I think that's quite needed.
Benefit.
Um, yeah, it's a huge benefit. You can find us on systemsleadership.eu.
Mhm.
And you can find me on LinkedIn as well. The reason why we say systems and leadership is because leaders need to act on systems, and they need to be able to sort of shape the containers and the learning and the change and tap the systems towards a more desired future. And that's why it's systemsleadership.eu. Um, and or email me, and we can come into a conversation. If you feel like you are a change agent, a decision maker, somebody who is confronted with a very complex situation and needs to find a way to start at the first place, to make sense of it all and to then move on. All of our training is very practical because you bring your own thing, you bring your own challenge, and you work together with others on it. So it's like a big playground where you can, play around, fail, see what happens, and emerge out of that transformed in terms of being able and capable of knowing what is the next thing.
My question would be, as you mentioned, experiential learning. And my question would be, my personal question would be, how do you manage to bring about experiential learning on a digital form? I mean, how do you manage to do that, Francisco? Give me an example.
Easy, easy. So one of the ways we do it is by making sure that people are talking to each other rather than giving them a PowerPoint presentation.
Mhm,
So we have a lot of exercises where we know exactly what the learning could be, and
mhm,
we guide people to experience that learning. So it's not just facts, but really trying it out, really getting feedback
mhm,
and building and iterating on that learning. And these are cycles of learning that can be done online as well, very easily through, for example, breakout rooms.
mhm,
And the leaders that are apprentices with us, and because we have an apprenticeship model, we don't do certification.
mhm,
They are trained to be courageous enough to identify learning in every moment and to flag it and to bring it up and to reflect it back. And we talked about reflection, to reflect it back into the room, into the container that we have, and say, hey, did you notice this? And this is a good reflection to have. And perhaps we can learn something out of that. Because it's learning in every moment. And you need to be courageous enough to address it sometimes, because holy cows are
mhm.
everywhere.
Exactly, exactly. Holy cows are everywhere. No better way to say it. Exactly. I will be definitely joining the movement at some point, Francisco. You be sure about that because I believe
Look forward.
your resume talks by itself. People, you can look it up. We will post all the information of Francisco if you give us an okay
Yes,
on
please.
our page. You can, as I said, Francisco, you can email him, hook him up on LinkedIn. He's very approachable. Nothing between. And as I mentioned before on our chat before we go on the live thing, I always give every guest. No one comes once. Everybody comes again and again. So we will have you again at some point, and we'll be more than happy to have you. But I want to give you also the floor. We live in a very unstable world, unstable society. There's many challenges. And as you mentioned before, there's no point of victimizing ourselves and everything. We should look for those windows of opportunity and capitalize on them. What is your advice to the people that saw this podcast and will be seeing this podcast, the leaders of tomorrow, or any citizen that wants to become from a passive citizen an active citizen? What is not I wouldn't say the cliche advice, tips or whatever. What do you have to say to these people, Francisco? What do you
Well,
have?
you're asking a coach, and a coach never gives advice.
Exactly.
So I have a few questions for these viewers, participants that are, willing to take a deeper look. Is certain simple questions. What is your purpose? What is it that drives you to show up? What drives you to stand up every day? What fulfills you? And what is holding you back? And that's it. And if you realize that something is holding you back, what are you going to do about it?
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's actually true. It's what you decide to do. It's yours to take. It's your decision. It's all about us. Find your ikigai, as the Japanese would say. Do you use that in your concept of educating? You use
Not at all. Not
not
at
at
all.
all,
Not
not at
at
all.
all.
Don't like the ikigai, or it's a nice way to actually make people understand the way of me. Tried it in a few
It is a
places.
great introduction, and I highly value these inputs. But
Mhm.
what I'm really after is the data from people rather than putting a model on them.
Exactly.
And they know, everybody knows what they really want,
Excellent.
and it's working through that.
Excellent. Excellent. So let me get this chance to thank everybody for watching. Francisco, thank you for being with us and giving us your time. Everybody, this was a live broadcast. You will be able to see the whole broadcast again in the next 10 minutes after we close this one up. We will be cutting the certain segments of our discussions and disseminating on different platforms. We will have Francisco, I believe, also again in the future for a nice conversation again. I hope you enjoyed it also, Francisco.
It was a pleasure to be here, and thank you for the questions. I always learn something and take away some inspiration.
Excellent. And we will also be in contact, Francisco. I will be more than thrilling, and Original Minds will be more than thrilled to work on something with you. Maybe, I don't know, you come to Cyprus, we will come up with something. And it's always great and inspiring to see the lights of the world and people like you. Thank you very much for the inspiration, for the information, for the invitation, Francisco. We wish you all the best. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being with us. We will see you next time. Coming week, we are back with more broadcast. Have a good evening, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye,
Ciao, ciao.
everyone.